Actually, it's today, the 10th of September. The 10th was the day that Mayor Barber told us to arrive. We would arrive on the 10th and then travel on the 11th, and the 12th, of course, was the Darshan program. Yeah. And what I thought, it still intrigues me how I got there, so you might like to hear the story. It's all because that I was there because, against all predictions, I passed Latin in my final school exam. In other words, I had the certificate, otherwise I wouldn't have had it. I went into the services during the war, and because of that, when I was discharged in 45, the government said that they would pay me £2 a week to go to university, if I wished to. I wouldn't have had that offer if I hadn't passed Latin against all predictions. And I liked the £2 a week. The university meant nothing to me. It was not in my family. And my brother-in-law, older than me, went with me to register, and he said, I'm going to do psychology. And I said, that'll do. In other words, it didn't really matter to me as long as I was getting the £2 a week. I was 21 and had no thoughts of ambition. I had nothing in mind. And okay, psychology became extremely disappointing. It was not at all what I wanted, because I'd been brought up, how would I put it, with religion, Christianity, very much in the family, very much. The whole family were that way inclined. And I met my father's brothers and my mother's brothers and sisters. I mean, it was all very much. And I became more and more frustrated. And then a friend, an older friend of my sister, who's older than me, lent me a book, Rama Krishna and Vivekananda, Prophets of New India. And I was staggered. I thought, this is incredible. It was the first time that I encountered the idea that there were such people, almost in my lifetime. Jesus was a remote figure, you know, somebody that you, yes, oh, he died for us, yes, you know, and he was to be loved and served. But it was all very, if nothing else, a sort of sense of duty. Or that's what you're supposed to do. And that really opened my eyes. And the next thing, the same man who had already heard of Mayor Barber, and having contact with Francis Brabazon, and he introduced me to members, well, the leader of the Sufi Society, the organisation established by Inayat Khan, who was a genuine fifth plane saint, and whose Barber confirmed, and I was drawn to it. And the first meeting that I went to, at the end of the meeting, a little book was thrust into my hand and said, you might like to read this, and I'd read anything that might give me, how would you say, enlightenment. You know, what is this? What is the relationship between God and life? What does it, where's the meaning? What's the purpose? I think like all of us, I wondered what was, what was life all about, particularly where was God and what relationship. And that little book was the volume 2 of the 5 set of discourses of Barber's, and that was the beginning. And then I met Francis a year later, and I was drawn to him. It was clear that he knew so much more than I did about this spirituality, and was active. That's what I liked. Sort of something was happening. I didn't want to just sit round and have talks and papers on spirituality. Let's do something. And so that was the beginning of a relationship. So 7 years later, okay, I finished the psychology course, so I became a psychologist. Okay? And I didn't regard myself as that, but I took work in personnel work in industry. But the thing is that by 1953, I was getting extremely restive. Nothing was happening in Melbourne where I was born and living. I'm married. We had 2 children then, and I wanted to. The one thing that made sense to me was what Francis was doing, building a house in Sydney in the hope, the fervent hope that Barber would come to Australia and live in it. And we would travel up in old cars and help him. One period, I remember 3 months, Joan, my first wife, it was not easy, living in a tent with 2 children, and not even a finished house. I mean, we were building it. The foundations were there, the walls were going up, that was it. Anyway, and so how to get there? I was walking in the streets of Melbourne. Why in the main street of Melbourne? Why, I don't know. But I met a man 20 years older, roughly 20 years older than me. We knew each other from the university psychology course. And he said, Bill, I've just been appointed Director of Army Psychology, a new department. Would you like a job as a psychologist? And I said, in the army, and I said, oh God, no, not the army, I didn't want to go back. And we parted amicably. It's incredible, but Barber arranged that I would meet him again, the same street, I don't say the same spot, but the same street, 2 weeks later. And again, Barber put it in my head. I suddenly blurted out, I said, will you give me a job in Sydney? And he said, yeah. It meant nothing to him, paid for by the government. And that's how I got to Sydney. And the day I arrived in Sydney, the head of the family, who were coming a little later, I met Francis Brabazon in the city, and we met in a cafe, and he came towards me as I entered the door, and he just handed me a piece of paper which had males over the age of 16 who love me come to be with me in the month of September. And I don't know, I can't describe how the effect that it had. In modern terms, I was blown out of my tiny brain. I picked that up from the young ones. I rather like it. But it did. It was incredible. The sudden realisation, what? And what was also quite remarkable was that I had helped in building the house in Melbourne that we lived in. And of course, I sold it in moving to Sydney. And for the first time in my life, I actually had a sum of money, £700, that doesn't sound much, but it was enough for my ticket to India, half the ticket for Francis, and plenty left over for Joan and the children while I was away. And so I sought from the director 6 weeks leave to go to India, and he swallowed hard and said, I'd only just started. And he said, oh, okay. So he rang back a couple of days later, no, sorry, refused. Briefly, I became a captain as a psychologist in the army, and going to India. I said I was going to India, and India was a bit associated with Russia at the time. So the army said no. And so, of course, I got very excited. I yelled into the phone. I said, look, I'm going, you know, this is it. And then had enough sense to say, I'm going to see my spiritual master, Mayor Barber. And you could hear him say, all right, Bill, keep your shirt on. Sort of, okay. Had no idea what I was about. But anyway, they gave me leave. I would have swum the ocean. I mean, my God, what an opportunity. I had no conception that such an opportunity would occur. The one thing I want to mention, I can remember even now, arriving in the early evening. I estimate was about 8 a.m., 8 p.m. You know, in the evening, and it was dark, but not that dark. And we walked up that road, you know, from the railway track. The bus went round, and we walked up, and I can experience even now that feeling. My God, you know, I don't know what it was, but there was an atmosphere. There was a presence. It was. Yeah. And so, and then the next morning we were taken to Wadia Park in Ahmednagar for the darshan program. And there was a platform, a dais created in this big open area, and there were already a few thousand people starting to mill around before Barbara arrived at 9 a.m. And okay, all of a sudden a cry went up, Barbara's coming. And I went over to the edge of the platform. We were up on this dais, this platform, and I went to the right side. I can still visualize it. I can still see it. And Barbara's car stopped right below me. So I was standing looking down, and I saw Barbara helped out of the car. The door was open. He came out in such a natural way. There was no fanfare. There was, you know, I didn't know what I was going to expect. But all I can tell you is that my eyes were caught on that figure. There was no question. Now I didn't scream. I didn't burst into tears. I didn't see light. I know people did. I know there were all sorts of reactions. I didn't. And but I do know that that I followed that figure as he was helped. A little gesture. Erich's father had his arm, this arm, and helping, and Baba moving so naturally, just like a person would, just sort of tapped his hand in a gentle way and glanced. And in that it was so clear, thank you, but it was done so naturally. It was, I remembered it. And then he walked on, and I followed that figure, being then surrounded by a lot of people. And the next thing I remember was Baba sitting on a chair like this on top of on the dais, and there were all sorts of speeches of welcome and so forth. And time passed, but the next thing I really remember was that I saw Baba in front of me about 10 or 12 feet. They had placed an arc of chairs, wooden, simple chairs, behind Baba for us 18 men, Western men that had gathered there. And I happened to be directly behind Baba. We all had that sense, but what I remember was looking at Baba's head and suddenly aware of the pigtail tucked into the collar. I don't know why, but it registered. And at that point, Baba turned. It was the first time that I saw that incisive, clear, precise movement. It was never ungraceful, but boy, was there purpose, was there strength, was there was no question, sort of. He knew what he was doing, and he turned and apparently looked at people the men on my left, and then he looked at me, and that was my meeting with Baba. There's no question that his eyes were like two shafts that went into me, as it were as it just went in, as though it was an empty space, and I felt a shock, and as though I was pinned back, and I felt this shock through my body, and then that was the end of that memory. I don't remember what happened after that. But I've got no doubt that at that point he decided, well, okay, put up with him. Another one to sort out. And so that was the beginning of a remarkable day. The memories I have is the incredible strength of Baba. Yes, I knew he was 60 years of age, but he was like a man of 40. The vigour with which he handed out prasad. He took with each person a little handful of sweets, Indian sweets. They're in a big basket alongside him, and that movement, and yes, it was incredible, the strength, the continued movement of that hour after hour with people moving by, and yet at the same time, all of a sudden somebody in front of him and Baba would stop and would suddenly caress their face or or gesture, and obviously a question which Eric would pick up. In other words, you would think that it was just automatic, but it wasn't. There's that awareness of what was going on, and stopping with those people, as I sort of assumed, I would say, loved Barbara, but were not just there for a blessing, in the hope that there'd be some special, reward for having been there and receiving his gift. The movement, what it stayed in my mind when in thinking of it was his figure. I remember standing on the side and watching the movement, and it was like his back was such a perfect curve. I don't know, but it was a beautiful back. It was so perfect in terms of the posture and the movement, and I couldn't help but think, like a bow and arrow. The movement of the arm was like the arrow of love that was directed to each one. And the other thing that struck me, it was for the first time I noticed one of the Mungli, obviously I didn't know who he was Bidel. I found out later, but that was the first time that I saw the incredible devotion, stamina of the Mungli under all conditions. Hour after hour, while Barbara was handing out, Bidel stood there solidly. It was never any wavering. There was never any I couldn't see any sighs or mopping the brow and gesturing of how much of the hours that he was doing it. Making sure that they are moving through so that as many as possible had that blessing of contact with Barbara. And that continued, of course, over the years, and then again, I love sort of, in a sense, being here with all these books, because I love books, and what's interesting is that the story's been more and more to me. Perhaps because I'm getting old. I don't know. But it's so wonderful that we have such literature. What an opportunity that we have to read about. Well, of course, there's some in my book, but apart from that, what I'm referring to also is Lord Mayor and the glimpses of Barbara. Wonderful, and the feeling of such preciousness that comes through when you read again, and of course for me it brings back so many memories and feelings. The 3 incredible weeks for me was very much a learning occasion, but I didn't realise a lot of it. It was only afterwards, in the years that went by, and then I realised the incredible opportunity that I have, to be at the time when God takes human form and actually lives amongst us and leaves an atmosphere, leaves all sorts of material like books and films, and how we can, as it were, cement the impression that we may have got when we first came to Barber. Barber touches us, each one of us, in some way. It's whether it's some experience that's where one calls out to God, you know, and as it were, gives oneself to that entirely. God help me to a simple. I can always remember some barber lover, I don't know who it was, but being driven through in the 60s, driven through New York, never heard of Barber, and comes, sees a big poster with a big photograph of Barber advertising a film or a meeting, and just looking at, oh, that's God. Like that. But how fortunate we are to have the so much, His presence so strong, as He has said, I'm as much with you now for 100 years and a little more as I was when I was in the body. And He's so available, and of course, after this period, He retreats more and more into Himself until we muck it up again, and there's a general cry, but brought about by the 5 perfect masters to bring Him again. It sort of turns on the switch, and then again we have an active presence of God in the world. Yeah. Let me see. There's so many things that have happened over those 3 weeks, yes.
I remember just recently reading it was the 12th when Wadi Park, then the 13th you had a day off with Bob. Then he came on the 14th. And Bob had mentioned while you were eating or something, he said, Easterners wouldn't understand my familiarity with you because you saw how they were at the park, just everyone clutching to get my darshan and just rushing, and I just wanted to add these. The sense of that to me too just struck me, that this here you are so intimately with Him after seeing this mass of humanity and the way He worked with them. And
yes,
just wondered if you had any sense of that.
It was an example of that for me. I was brought up with the idea in church. This was a serious matter, and on the 14th, when Barbara was with us personally, is not in the darshan program, but with us, and at one point Barbara said, have you got everything that you want? Have you been looked after properly, you know? And we got everything. And somebody, of course it had to be an American, what about entertainment? I was shocked. Honestly, this is not what this was a very serious matter. My God, it's not just a PhD, it's something beyond a PhD, you know. And the other occasion was when we were on our way to Sakori, to go to the Upasi Maharaja ashram, and we stopped at a village. Sorry, forget the name. And there was a little darshan program, and then we were just there. And Baba, Jesse, what about any jokes? Again, and then Charles Purdom told this joke, which you all must know. Maybe. Anyway, in case there's any new ones. Charles Purdom said there was a Roman Catholic school for girls, and the Mother Superior was interviewing the senior girls, asking them what they wanted to do when they left school, and the Mother Superior said, "Now, dear, what would you like to do?" And the girl said, "I want to be a prostitute." And the Mother Superior said, "Oh, please, now, Mother Mary, now go away. Look, think about it overnight and come back, and I'll ask you again tomorrow." And so the morning came, and Mother Superior called her in again. "Now, what is it that you want to be?" And the girl repeated, and the mother said, "Oh, thank heaven, thank God," or something. "I'm sorry, thank God. I thought you meant a Protestant." Sorry, I didn't tell it very well. But the point was that I was shocked. Oh my God, Tammy saying that to God, and God was laughing at it. He enjoyed it, see, and you could see how I don't know how conservative I was. Yeah, there were so many. If I can list the thing, but the one important time was the interview. Baba said that we'd all have an interview. Well, in our case, there were three from Australia: Francis Brabazon, myself, and another young man. We were the two youngest of the. And there were two more came. In the end, it was, I think, 20 of us, 20 men, and we were the two youngest. And our turn came, and we went into the western room of the retreat in Upper Marabad. Those that have been in India would know what I'm referring to. And it was set up like a simple lounge, and Baba was seated in a chair like this, and there was a little carpet in front of him. And I could remember the three of us coming in, and as we approached him, Baba gestured to Francis, "You have brought me 2 jewels," and I can tell you that again it was the only effect that it had on me, and at any other time too, when there was such an exchange with Baba, was that again you felt so accepted by him, a warm, loving acceptance, and yet at the same time it was also like a stimulation to prove worthy of being a Jew. You know what I mean? It was also an inspiration. Press on with this, on this game, and we sat down, and Francis was in the middle, and Francis is right, and John Valentine, the other young man, on Francis' left, and for the first time, I was actually looking at Baba's face so close, the rest of the time was, anyway, it doesn't matter. It was the first time that I actually could see and have that intimate connection with Barbara. But one-to-one, when Barbara asked me, "Do you love me?" And I said, "Yes, Barbara." And the incredible, beautiful expression of the face, it was fascinating. You just wanted to keep looking at it. And yet it was not, I'm not saying that you were overwhelmed. It was so stimulating, so inspiring. It was all that, but more the fact that one became absolutely absorbed in watching this incredible face and the clarity of the expressions. It's sort of, you knew what he was saying, and yet there were words that came there, and you didn't. All I can say is that, like so many have said before me, also that you weren't aware that he was silent. He just seemed so much with one. And okay, so, "Bill, do you love me?" I said, "Yes, Barbara." "Will you obey me?" "Yes, Barbara." Will you walk through the streets of Nugget naked if I told you to?" "Yes, Barbara." There were two others. I don't remember them now. And although I asked Eric, it didn't mean anything. There were so many that Barbara would ask. But the point is, I said yes. The fact that if you like walking the streets of naked in Nugget is sort of, well, so what. There was a more serious one, if you like to put it that way, in '56 when Barbara came to Australia for the first time. And he asked, there were about 30 of us in the big room at Mayor House in Sydney with him, and he suddenly said, who loves me? Put up the hand of those who love me. And I hesitated at that point. Can I honestly put my hand up? You know, that momentary, that sudden jolt of thought. And Barbara immediately pointed to me and said, "Bill, do you love me?" And I said, "Yes, Barbara." And he said, "Will you throw your 3 children into the ocean if I told you to?" And I said, "Yes, Barbara." It was so interesting, really. I didn't realise until later, but as the years went by, I realised how he was saying, "They're mine, but I'm you're to look after them. You have the responsibility of bringing them up and giving them as much as you can and what is worthwhile. An environment, how would you put it? Not a teaching, but the opportunity to absorb something that is worthwhile and will give them strength for their life. I don't know whether I'm making myself clear, but anyway. But go back to that interview, and okay, now in going there to be with Barbara, I had spent all the money. That £700 was gone, except what might have been left with Joan. There might have been a bit left, I don't remember. But it meant we had no roof over our heads. That £700, the intention was in the beginning that yes, I sold the house in Melbourne, I was going to purchase another block of land near Francis building, build there and help Francis, work with Francis. I didn't have anything. And Barbara just, it was so natural. He's, in the midst of the interview, he suddenly says to Francis, that house that you're building on at Beacon Hill, hand it over to Bill. Solve the problem. Then, not that it didn't occur to me how he had solved the problem, it was only of course afterwards, but how beautiful that he looked after it. He didn't know I was married, he didn't ask me whether I was married, he didn't ask me if I had children, he didn't ask me if I had money. It was just handed over. And then on another occasion, we're sitting there and Barbara suddenly looks at John Valentine, who was a very withdrawn, quiet person, very nice man, but very withdrawn and very new to Barbara. He hadn't heard of Barbara for very long. And Barbara suddenly looks at him and says, who do you take me to be? And John it was a shock to be confronted with it. And he sort of hesitated, then he blurted out, a perfect master, which of course is what he'd read. And Barbara looked at him gently, but quizzically, as it were, how would you know? And I thought, my God, yes, that's right. How would you know? How easy it is to make assertions, to make statements. But hey, to what extent is it really a part of one? To what extent has one made it alive, something meaningful in oneself? And I've absorbed this in solving this. I can remember sort of, as it were, glancing towards John at the same time, looking at Barbara, and then looking at Barbara. And Barbara suddenly asked me the same question. And to this day, I have no idea where it came from. Or it just came out, and I said, Barbara, you are my ideal. You are what I would like to be myself. And Barbara beamed, smiled so warmly, and then gestured. He turned like this. It was so, I can remember so clearly, sort of gestured. And all of a sudden I realised that it was Eric standing behind, and he was the voice that I was hearing. We were so absorbed in that beautiful face of that, not only beautiful, but so fascinating. The movement, the gestures, the shades of meaning, and so forth. Yeah. And I thought, oh. So that's where the voice is. And that was Eric. And there were, he told us to occupy the seclusion cabin near the Samadhi, the tomb shrine, instead of being up on the upper floor of the retreat at Baraban, where all the men were occupied. We were there. So it rained so beautifully. A very comfortable bed with a curtain between in each section, and a little dressing table, a little table that one can put one's things on. And excuse me, and I can't help but sort of think that it was good that we had Francis with us, because I suspected that Barbara was getting Francis that special, but we had the benefit, John and I, of also being in that cabin, which was an important period, a place of seclusion for Barbara. That cabin, you know it there. Yeah. There was an occasion where I was very serious in my approach to Barbara. I firmly believed that one needed a thorough knowledge of the discourses, of the basis of Baba's, as it were, teachings to us, that was essential before we could really love and serve him. And with one of the youngest American, Lud Dimple, I remember sitting in seclusion cabin. I was sitting on my bed and he was sitting on Francis. We were talking about Baba, and at some point he says, well, of course, the only thing that really matters is love for him. And I said, yeah, love's important, but what really is needed is a thorough knowledge. That'll teach me. And so that was the occasion when Baba, whether that started, I don't know, but there I was writing down everything that Baba said in the morning sessions of discourses that he was giving us. Messages, not discourses, messages, but on particular aspects of the spiritual path. And Baba suddenly stopped and looked at the two of us like this and said, these two lads have a love for truth. And then we directed that we were to sit in the dome, as it was called in those days. We were to sit there for half an hour at midnight. We were to sit still, not move, have our eyes open, and inwardly take his name. And as Baba said, after 7 nights, you might get a glimpse of God, which didn't mean, it didn't mean a thing to me. All I was intent on was, Baba told me to sit there, okay, I sit. That was my approach. And that first night, the experience that I had of absolutely no sound. There was nothing, no cars, nothing, no people, no animals. There was no electricity in Maribad, and it was pitch black when the doors and windows were shut, and I was in there sitting on the edge of the crypt where Baba's body subsequently lay. It was on the right side, and all of a sudden, I was in the atmosphere of that place where Baba had spent so much seclusion and work, and I was, you could say, I was stunned. All I was aware of was that I had no point of reference. It was a sense of being, as it were, being alone in the universe. I had nothing. No chink of light, no sound whatsoever, nothing. And all my knowledge, all the reading I had done for 7 years in preparation for, you could say, of meeting him, all went for nothing. So much, so what? And that was when I said, that was the beginning of my realization that if you want to follow Baba, if you want the truth, you've got to love him. It's only that love that will carry on. Well, that's why it was my experience. And as I went over the years, I realized how Baba had shocked me into that realization that, and it reminded me of the one interview that he gave, an outsider, when he came to Australia in 1956, where the young man asked Baba, is intellectual conviction necessary for God realization? And Baba said, no, it is but a step on the way. And then he pointed to Francis and said, let us pretend that Francis is illiterate. He hasn't read anything, but he's heard of God. And he falls in love with God, and all he longs for is to realize God, to gain union with God. And there is the young man, intellectually convinced, but no love for God. And then with Erich, he pointed then to Erich, that Erich has love for God, and he's also read much. And Erich gives a little laugh, and I have read God speaks. and then Baba goes back that the love for God will bring one to God, but what he cannot help anyone else. The person with intellectual conviction can never realize God without love. And Erich, who has love for God and also knowledge, can not only realize God because of that love, but can help others. And so there was one learning after another, so much, but it's sort of like, it's like all of us in life. You know how Baba gives us all lessons to learn in the situations he creates and puts us through, and how, like myself, it was up to me to then gradually sort of evaluate it. What did it mean? What is Baba saying to me? What does this? What I'm going through? What does it mean to me? What is the lesson that Baba is giving me? And how always, if one sort of, as it were, takes him into it, into the situation, as it were, into one's mind, his light, love for him, and saying, Baba, what is it? I feel so aggrieved, I feel so hurt, I feel so what unjustness or something, all the things that one agonises over and one goes through. Hey, what does it mean? And facing that, taking it, going into it with him, and the degree of love that one has in the sense of, well, Baba, I want you. I don't want this. What are you saying to me? And one become, it sort of reminds me of Kitty last night, the film. I don't know who was there, but it was wonderful, where she talks about consciousness being awareness. And that's what, again, that the love for him, the effort to please that love, to respond to the love that he gives one, and that, as it were, can increase the degree of awareness that one has of the consciousness that is within us. As Baba said, the 3/4 of the consciousness is unconscious. There's only a bit that's conscious. We're aware what we're aware of, but through love for him, through as it were, turning to him rather than that the justification of the urges of the lower self. You felt what I mean? If turning to Him can bring about a greater awareness of what is within us. Fear. The dome, I didn't feel fear, but Barbara said fear to me the next day. Fear means no love. Love means no fear. And it took me years to realise, yes, of course, the fear is the fear of letting go oneself in response to his wish for our behaviour and so forth. Anyway, so all right, I don't know, I'm rambling on, but I don't know, how's the time? I don't want to...
Got about 10 more minutes till you're about an hour.
Oh, all right. Well, is there anything that I mean, I can tell you more things that more experiences. The mornings when we had the singing, the ghazals, the Urdu songs of love for God. I found that extremely moving. You know, I had never heard them before. We had a few Western songs, Western singers, Paul Robeson, wonderful, you know, various ones, the old ones that I knew and grown up with, but the Qawwali singers, the singing the ghazal was another matter, but with Baba, man, I remember the incredible. There was again. It's only now that I realise what an atmosphere there was in that room with Baba, obviously loving the recordings that were being played, and then Baba would give certain interpretations of the words, but it was the actual singing that was very so yeah.
You know, Baba said early on that the purpose for calling you was this big meeting at the end of the 3 incredible weeks, and he said it was very, very important. Did you feel that importance, and did you get as much out of that as the...
I know that. I tell you, it's very thick.
Well, even reading about it, I get it seems, and everybody I've heard, it seems like the time with Baba was way more important than the meeting that Baba said was so important.
Exactly. I mean, Baba saying that he was going to drop the body, that 3/4 of the world would be destroyed. I said, as far as I was concerned, yeah, okay. Well, that's what's going to happen. Let's press on. I mean, you know, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. You know, I can only tell you what I've experienced, which is, it's so little compared with you know, listening to Erich and the rest, and how wonderful it was, how wonderful Nunley Hall was. I mean, it was wonderful, more wonderful when Barbara was there, but hey, it was how fortunate we are. And look at the centre that he's left us. How beautiful. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I love your description of Baba walking, picking up stones. Can you?
I'll again, you'll never forget that. It's so clear in my mind. I noticed Baba walking up the path from the railway line, I mean, in those days, in '54, the trees weren't grown. There were some trees, but they were stunted and scattered more. And so he was very visible, but particularly at a certain point where he started to come up the straight path to the gates, you know, the opening of the compound, and know that. And I thought, oh yeah, how beautiful. So the other mornings I would when I knew he was coming, I would get up and sit on the rock wall that surrounded the compound, so I could see even more clearly him coming up. And I'll never forget, absolutely, it was so beautiful. I've seen him walk, my God, no wonder in the early days they mainly had to ride bicycles, or some of them had to ride bicycles to keep up with him, and that you know, that's written. But this time that walk up was so beautiful. It was just like a flowing movement. So absolutely graceful, effortless. It was all as I've tried to write in the book, that it was like a perfect dancer for that moment. It was perfect. And yet at the same time, without any shadow of alteration in that perfect movement, he would stoop and pick up a stone and toss it to the side. It was, yeah, just so beautiful. And then there was an occasion where I was aware that Val had awakenings and Don Stevens had intuitions, and so I thought, damn it, I'm going to have something to do. So I decided on Revelations. And so one time in a talk actually was in the meeting place, and Wendy Connor happened to be there. And I said, you know, I was thinking about it today, and I said, you know, I think that what Barbara was doing by picking up those stones and throwing to the side, of clearing the path for us as we go up the path to him. And Wendy calls out, that's half a revelation. So at least I got a half. That's all I've managed.
That's a great.
Okay, J. Barbara.
Yeah.